Tonight, we explore a different fate for Jon Snow, a world where the island of Dragonstone held one secret more than anyone living knew. Beneath the volcano's heart, preserved in old Valyrian magic and the deep heat of the earth, the last descendant of Vhagar had slept for 170 years, waiting for blood that smelled like home. Jon Snow arrived at Dragonstone to beg for dragonglass and a foreign queen's alliance. He would leave as something the realm had not seen in 3 generations, a Targaryen on Dragonback. And the moment Vhagar rose from the dark behind him, 2 things became impossible to stop: the war that the world needed to fight, and the war that the world was determined to fight instead. This is the story of what might have happened if Jon Snow bonded with Vhagar's last descendant, and what it cost him to survive it. Dragonstone. What he came for. 304 CC. Jon Snow came to Dragonstone on a grey morning with a handful of men and no plan that could survive contact with a queen who had 3 dragons. Davos had called it the most reckless thing Jon had done since taking a knife in the chest, which Davos felt was an important benchmark for recklessness, given that Jon had technically died from it. Jon had pointed out that they needed dragonglass, that the Night King's army had numbers no northern force could match on the ground, and that the only person in the world with both dragons and a claim to the south was currently sitting on an island 30 miles off the coast. Davos had pointed out that the only person in the world with dragons and a claim to the south was also a woman who expected kings to kneel, and who had crossed the narrow sea specifically so that people would stop failing to do that. They had both been right. The approach to Dragonstone by boat was the approach that the castle was built for, the specific architectural argument of a fortress designed to communicate, by its sheer improbability, that the people inside it were not concerned about you. Steep cliffs, black stone, the castle rising from the rock, as though the rock had simply decided one day to become a castle, and the Targaryens had found it that way. And above it, circling in the grey sky, the dragons. 3 of them. Jon stood at the boat's prow and watched them, and felt the thing he always felt when he looked at the wrong sky: the cold. The things that were larger than the scale that men were built to fight. He had felt it north of the wall. He felt it here, looking at creatures that dwarfed anything walking the ground below them. And he filed it with the other things he kept in the category of real, which was the category that mattered. Davos stood beside him. "You're not going to kneel," Davos said. "Not a question." "I'm king in the north," Jon said. "She's going to mention that." "I'm aware." "Several times, possibly," with increasing emphasis. "I know, Davos." The boat came into the dock. The Queen's reception was everything the castle had promised. The Dothraki lining the steps, the Unsullied at the gate, the procession designed to communicate that every person who walked it was walking towards someone who did not need to impress you, because she had moved beyond the stage of needing to impress anyone. Jon walked through it with the specific economy of a man who had been trained by Ned Stark, and further trained by the Night's Watch, and further trained by dying, which was, without performing either courage or fear. Tyrion Lannister met him at the top of the steps. "Lord Snow," Tyrion said. Then, before Jon could correct him, "King Snow. My apologies. The title is new enough that the realm hasn't quite finished adjusting." He looked at Jon with the assessment of a man who had spent his life reading people across tables, and who was already reading this one. "How was the crossing?" "Cold," Jon said. "The North tends to export that." Tyrion gestured toward the doors. "The Queen will receive you in the throne room. I'd recommend against leading with the White Walkers immediately. There's a certain order of operations that works better." "What order?" "Demonstrate that you're not a threat, then demonstrate that you're useful, then raise the thing that sounds like madness." He paused. "The White Walkers are, at this juncture, going to sound like madness." "They are madness," Jon said. "They're also real." "Yes," Tyrion said, "but she doesn't know that yet. She knows what she knows, and she spent the last year learning that the world is significantly less organized than she had planned for. Try not to add too much new information at once. They went inside. Daenerys. The first meeting, or the throne room of Dragonstone, was the room that the Stone Egg had been designed around. The high black walls, the carved dragons ascending toward the ceiling. The throne that was not the Iron Throne, but was clearly made by people who had also made the Iron Throne, and who understood what a throne was supposed to communicate. Daenerys sat in it the way she sat in most things, not as though she had claimed it, but as though she had always been in it, and was simply allowing the rest of the world to catch up. She was younger than Jon had expected. She was more beautiful than Jon had expected, and she was watching him with the patience of a woman who had been handed things she'd already decided about. "You will forgive me if I don't kneel," Jon said, before she could open with it. "I don't mean it as disrespect. I am the king in the north. My people chose me. I did not choose myself. Kneeling to you would undo what they chose, and they are the people whose lives I'm here to protect." He looked at her. "I came to ask for dragonglass and an alliance. I am offering you the same. The North's support in the wars to come. I am asking for your support in the war that is already here." Daenerys looked at him. The room was very quiet in the way that rooms were quiet when the important thing was already being said, and the performance of waiting was just that. "You're asking me to fight alongside you," she said. "Against the Night King," Jon said. "Against the dead." "You are the first person who has arrived on this island," Daenerys said, "to tell me that his primary concern is dead men walking north of a wall. I'm probably the first person who has arrived on this island who's seen them." She held the gaze. "Missandei," she said, "have the dragonglass mines surveyed. Find out what we have." She looked at Jon. "You may mine the dragonglass you need. In exchange, I would ask that you tell me what you actually know about what is coming. Not the summary, the detail." She paused. "I find summaries are for people who have already decided." Jon looked at her. "Fair," he said. "It is." She held the gaze. "You haven't asked me to bend the knee." "I didn't come here for that." "No. You came here because you're desperate enough to ask a foreign queen for rocks." There was something in it. Not cruelty. Something else. The assessment of someone who understood desperation from the inside, and was respecting the honesty of his. "Tell me about the dead. Everything you know. Then I'll decide whether you're a king, or a man with a story." Jon sat. He told her. It took most of the afternoon. The cave. What he found there. The dragonglass was in the caves beneath Dragonstone. Jon went down with Daenerys the next day. Her idea, the Queen's efficient decision to see the Alliance's practical component rather than merely authorizing it. The caves were old and dark and warm in the way that things were warm when they were close to the Earth's real heat. Not the surface heat that the sun produced, but the deeper heat, the geological heat, the warmth of something that had been burning since before anyone was alive to notice it. They walked with torches. The dragonglass deposits were everywhere. The black obsidian in seams through the rock, gleaming in the torchlight with the specific dark brilliance of a material that wasn't quite stone and wasn't quite glass, and that had been used for weapons and ceremonial objects for 8,000 years before anyone in Westeros knew why it mattered. Daenerys showed him the cave paintings. They were old, older than the Valyrian freehold, older than the Targaryens, the first men and the children of the forest, leaving their record on the cave walls in the specific language of people who had no written language and whose stories were therefore made in images. The patterns, the spirals that echoed the patterns the White Walkers made with their dead, the figures of men and the children side by side. "They fought together," Jon said, "before, the last time." "I know what the histories say," Daenerys said. "Then you know it's real." She held the torch and looked at the wall, and her face was doing something that she was not performing. The actual Daenerys face, the one that existed under the Queen, The woman who had crossed the world on the belief that she was the heir to a dynasty that had ruled for 300 years, and who was now standing in the evidence that the world had been stranger and older than any dynasty for much longer. "I know what the histories say," she repeated. "I am deciding what I believe." "Sometimes there isn't time for the deciding," Jon said. She looked at him. "Show me everything," she said. "Everything in this cave. Then I'll decide." They went deeper. The dragonglass seams ran down and east, and Jon followed them with the specific orientation of someone who had been tracking things in the dark for long enough that the dark was no longer the obstacle, but simply the medium. He held the torch. He watched the seams. And then, the warmth changed. Not the geological warmth, something else. The specific wrong warmth. The warmth that wasn't weather or rock or proximity to volcanic heat, but something that was its own category. A warmth that recognized something and was responding to the recognition. Jon stopped. "What is it?" Daenerys said. Jon held the torch out. The tunnel continued past the dragonglass into a deeper dark that was not on any map of Dragonstone's caves. He had seen the maps. Davos had sourced them from the Citadel. Old maps of the island's underground passages, the legacy of maesters who had served here. This passage was not on the maps. The passage went somewhere the maps had decided not to record. "There's something further," he said. "The maps don't show." "I know." He looked at her. "I want to go further." Daenerys looked at the passage. She looked at Jon. She had the expression of a woman who had learned, through the specific education of being Daenerys Targaryen, that the things that looked most like traps were often simply interesting. "Lead," she said. Jon led. The passage went down for 50 feet, and then leveled, and then opened, without warning, into a chamber that was not a natural chamber. It was too round, too proportional. The stone too smooth at the walls. It had been shaped. By what and when and for what purpose were questions that the chamber itself was not answering. But it had been shaped by something that understood that the thing it was housing required specific dimensions. The specific dimensions of a dragon. Jon held the torch up. The heat in the chamber was extraordinary. Not the burning heat of fire, the deep, impossible heat of something that had been smoldering for a very long time without going out. And in the chamber's center, coiled in a posture that was too structured to be accidental, too perfect to be the result of decay, was a shape that the torch revealed in pieces, scale, the size of a cartwheel. Claw, 5 feet from tip to joint. A tail, wound in the specific architecture of something that had decided exactly how to be still. Daenerys made a sound. Not a word. The sound a person made when they saw something they had no category for. The shape was enormous. Not Drogon enormous, Rhaegal's size perhaps. The middle dragon. The one that was large without being the largest, but it was ancient in a way that the younger dragons weren't. The scales not the vivid green or gold or black of Drogon and the others, but darker, preserved. The colors of something that had been sleeping for so long that even the colors had learned to be patient. It was breathing. Not visibly, not the chest rising rise and fall of a living thing, but the air in the chamber was moving in a rhythm that the chamber's stone was not producing. In, out, impossibly slow. The respiration of something that had been asleep for 170 years and that had kept the pace of a thing that did not need the same urgency from breathing that the living required. Jon took a step forward. Daenerys grabbed his arm. "Don't," she said. "It's not moving," Jon said. "It's a dragon," she said. "They don't need to move to kill you." Jon looked at the shape. He looked at the scale. He looked at the darkness of it. The ancient preserved stillness. And he felt the warmth that had pulled him through the passage, and that was now, in this chamber, not a pull anymore, but a presence. The specific awareness of something that was aware of him, not through sight or sound or smell, but through something that operated at a level he didn't have words for. He took another step, and the eye opened. The eye. What the dragon saw. The eye was amber gold. Not the brilliant, vivid gold of the younger dragons, the amber of something old, preserved, the color of resin rather than fire. It was the size of Jon's chest, and it was looking at him with the attention of something that had been waiting for a very long time, and was not surprised that the waiting was over. Jon did not run. This was not courage in any philosophical sense. It was the specific quality of a man who had stopped running from things because running had repeatedly failed as a strategy, and he had made a practical decision to try standing still instead. He stood still. The eye looked at him, and then the great head moved, slowly, the enormous muscle of a neck lifting the head from its coiled position, the head alone the size of a horse. The dragon breathed on him. Not fire, breath, the vast exhale of something that had been holding its breath for 170 years and was letting it out at last. And the breath was warm in a way that should have been burning but wasn't. A warmth that recognized him rather than consumed him. The warmth of something that knew his blood and was greeting it. Jon held very still. The head came close. Impossibly close. The scale face 3 feet from his. The amber eye regarding him with an intelligence that was not human but was not absent. Jon could smell it. Old heat, deep earth, the faint sulfur of volcanic preservation. Underneath that, something else. Something that wasn't a smell, but was registered in the same way as a smell. Recognition. The dragon recognized him the way the wolf had recognized him. The way Ghost had come to him in the snow. Not chosen, but inherent. Jon raised his hand. He put it against the scale. The scale was warm and rough, and the warmth went up his arm and through his chest and into him in a way that was nothing like what he had expected, and exactly what he had expected simultaneously. The connection, the bond, the thing that dragon riders described in the histories as the moment that nothing could undo. He felt the dragon in the way he felt Ghost. Not words, but presence. The vast, ancient awareness of a creature that had been sleeping in a rock for 170 years, and that had woken up for him. Behind him, Daenerys had not moved. She was standing at the chamber's entrance, and she was looking at what was happening, and her face was doing something that Jon did not see, because he wasn't looking at her. But Davos would describe it later when Davos was told about it, secondhand, from Missandei, who had heard it from a guard. The queen had looked at the dragon choosing the king in the north, and her face had been doing something that was not rage and not grief and not joy, but some combination of all three that did not have a name in any language on either side of the narrow sea. The dragon made a sound, not a roar, something lower, a recognition expressed in sound, the same register that the breath had been, the communication between a dragon and the person it had decided on, which was not a decision in the way humans made decisions, but a fact in the way biology made facts. This one. Jon stood with his hand on the scale. The amber eye watched him. "What is your name?" Jon said. He did not know why he said it. He knew the dragon could not answer, but it felt right to ask the way it felt right to talk to Ghost, who also could not answer, in the specific understanding that communication between a man and a wolf, or a man and a dragon, was not dependent on language. The eye regarded him. Jon thought, Vhagar. The word arrived not from anywhere external, but from somewhere internal. The part of him that was Lyanna's blood, and Rhaegar's blood, and 8,000 years of dragon lords reaching down through time. The ancestral knowledge of a dynasty that had spent 300 years in the company of the creatures, and that had never quite finished leaving its traces in the bloodline. Vhagar. The dragon breathed out again. The warmth in the chamber rose. Behind him, he heard Daenerys say, "We need to go up." Her voice was steady. He gave her that. "Yes," Jon said. He turned from the dragon. The dragon watched him go. When they reached the passage entrance and Jon looked back, Vhagar's eye was still open, amber gold in the chamber's dark, watching the passage the way a fire watched a door after someone had closed it, with the specific awareness of something that knew what was on the other side, and was simply waiting for it to open again. The courtyard. What Daenerys did. They came out of the cave and into the courtyard, and Daenerys walked past her advisors and past the unsullied guards and went to the battlements and looked at the sea, and Jon let her. He stood in the courtyard. Tyrion appeared beside him. "What happened down there?" Tyrion said. "There's a dragon beneath the island," Jon said. Tyrion looked at him. "I'm sorry. A dragon. In the caves beneath Dragonstone. Preserved. Sleeping. Very large." Tyrion opened his mouth and closed it. "And?" he said. "It woke when I touched the stone," Jon said. "It breathed on me. I put my hand on it." Tyrion turned to look at Daenerys at the battlements. "Oh," Tyrion said. "Yes. And she was there. She saw it. She saw it." Tyrion absorbed this with the specific Tyrion quality of a man absorbing information that was both much worse and much more interesting than expected. "A dragon chose you," he said. "A dragon chose me. In front of Daenerys Targaryen. In front of Daenerys Targaryen, who came to this island on the understanding that she was the last Dragon Lord. I know. And has 3 dragons. I know, Tyrion." Tyrion looked at the battlements. "Right," he said. He poured 2 cups of wine from somewhere, handed one to Jon. "Drink this. Then we're going to have a very long conversation about what happens next and whether you're still alive at the end of it." Jon drank the wine. Daenerys turned from the battlements. She came back to the courtyard with the specific Daenerys posture of a woman who had made a decision in private and was now executing it in public. And the decision was control. She walked to Jon with her council watching, and she stopped in front of him and she held his gaze. "You didn't know it was there," she said. "No. You didn't come here for that? I came for dragonglass and an alliance." She held the gaze, testing, reading him the way she read everything, for performance, for the gap between what someone projected and what they were actually doing. "The dragon has never responded to me," she said, "or to anyone. I didn't know it existed. The island's histories say nothing of it." She looked at him. "It chose you?" "Yes, because you're Targaryen." It was not a question. She had been doing the arithmetic since the chamber. "You came here as Jon Snow, bastard son of Eddard Stark, king in the north. But a dragon doesn't choose northern bastards." Her voice was controlled. "Who are you?" Jon looked at her. "I don't know yet," he said. "I have suspicions. I haven't been able to confirm them." "Suspicions?" She held the word. "You're standing in my courtyard, on my island, having just bonded with a dragon that has been sleeping in my island's foundations for 170 years, and you have suspicions. My father, Ned Stark, kept a secret about my birth. I know enough to know the secret exists. I don't know the full content of it." She held the gaze for a moment longer. "You will stay," she said. "As a guest, not a prisoner. As a guest who is going to tell me everything he suspects, in order. Beginning tonight." She looked at Tyrion. "Arrange dinner. Just us. No council." She looked back at Jon. "And whatever is in that cave, whatever that dragon is, it will remain in that cave until I know what it is, and what it means, and what it intends." "I don't think it intends anything specific," Jon said. "It's asleep." "It woke for you," Daenerys said. "It intends something." She walked past him toward the keep. Tyrion watched her go. "How are you at dinner conversation?" he said to Jon. "Not great," Jon said. "Honest. That might actually help." He started after Daenerys. "Try not to mention the White Walkers for at least the first hour." Jon stood in the courtyard alone. He looked at the cave entrance. From somewhere beneath the rock, he could feel the warmth. Vhagar, awake now, in the dark, waiting with the patience of something that had already demonstrated it could wait for 170 years. Jon had a dragon. He had come to Dragonstone for dragonglass. He thought, the North is not going to believe this. he went inside. Dinner. The truth she drew out of him. The dinner was exactly as uncomfortable as Tyrion had predicted, and considerably more honest than Jon had planned. Daenerys asked questions the way she did most things, with the patience of a woman who had time, and the directness of one who had decided that having time was not a reason to waste it. She asked about his death and his resurrection, which Jon confirmed with the bluntness he brought to most things he wished were not true. She absorbed this. She asked about the Night's Watch, about what he'd seen north of the Wall, about the specific details of White behavior and White Walker movement that she had been hearing as summary and now wanted as account. He gave her the account. She listened in the way that she clearly didn't always listen, with the part of her that was not the queen, but the person who had been born to parents she never knew and raised in a world that kept trying to reduce her to a symbol. The part of her that recognized other people who had been made into symbols and who found the making wearing. An hour in, she said, "What do you think you are?" "What do you mean?" Jon said. "You said you have suspicions. About your birth. About why the dragon chose you." She held the wine cup. "I want to know what you think you are. Not what you know. What you think." Jon sat with this. "I think," he said slowly, "that Ned Stark was not my father. I think my mother was a Stark. I think my father..." He stopped. "I think my father was Targaryen. The specifics I can't confirm. My father, Ned, took the secret to his grave." He held her gaze. "I think the dragon answers that question, if anyone needed it answered." Daenerys held the wine cup. "Rhaegar had a son," she said. "Yes." He held on to it. "Your brother. He disappeared with Lyanna Stark before the rebellion. Ned Stark came back from the south with a bastard and never explained the mother." He held on to it. "I've been living in the gap between those two facts my whole life." The silence in the room. Daenerys put the cup down. "If you are Rhaegar's son," she said carefully, "then you are not a bastard. Rhaegar was married to Lyanna Stark before. The histories suggest, before you were born. The maesters who've studied the rebellion think the marriage may have been real." She held his gaze. "Which would make you the legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen." A pause. "Which would make you the heir to the Iron Throne." Jon said, "I'm the king in the north." "You're the heir to the Iron Throne," Daenerys said. Her voice was very controlled. "Whether you want it or not." "I don't want it." "I know you don't." She held the gaze. "That is the most annoying thing you could possibly have said." She picked the cup back up, drank. "I have spent my life preparing the throne. Every decision I have ever made has been oriented around reclaiming it. I crossed the sea. I raised an army. I freed slaves. I bred dragons." She held the gaze. "I came to Westeros with 3 dragons, and a claim I have been building since I was a child. And in my first month on this island, a northern king comes to ask for rocks, and a dragon in my basement bonds with him, because he happens to have my brother's blood." Jon said nothing. "I am not going to give you the throne," she said. "I want you to understand that. Whatever the bloodline says, whatever the legal succession, I am not going to simply step aside." "I'm not asking you to," Jon said. "I know you're not asking." She held the gaze. "That's also annoying. It would be easier if you were trying to take it. Then I'd know exactly what to do with you." She set the cup down. "Instead, you're sitting in my dining room, genuinely not caring about the most important object in the known world, which means I cannot fight you, and I cannot trust you, and I cannot put you in a cell, because you haven't actually done anything except let a dragon breathe on you." Jon looked at her. "What do you want to do with me?" he said. She held his gaze for a long moment. "I want to figure out what you are," she said. "And then I want to figure out how to make you useful." She paused. The dragon being yours doesn't change the immediate problem, which is that you need dragonglass and I need allies, and the Night King doesn't care about either of our claims to the throne. No, Jon agreed. So we continue as we were. You mine the dragonglass. She stopped, started again. We discussed the terms of an alliance. And the dragon, Jon said. She held the gaze. And the dragon, she said. The dragon is going to need to come out of the cave eventually. When it does, she held the gaze. When it does, the world is going to know. And what the world is going to say is not, Jon Snow has a dragon. What it's going to say is, Rhaegar's heir has come home. Jon looked at her. That's not what I am, he said. It doesn't matter what you are, Daenerys said. It matters what the world says you are. You learned that in the north. She held the gaze. I learned it in exile. The story people tell about you is more powerful than the truth of you. And the story they're going to tell about you is, the true king has a dragon. She refilled her cup. Get some sleep, she said. You're going to need it. Because tomorrow, the world starts learning what happened in that cave, and there is nothing either of us can do to stop it. Tyrion, what he did with the information. Tyrion spent most of the night thinking. This was not unusual. Tyrion spent most nights thinking, had spent most nights thinking since he was old enough to understand that thinking was the thing he was better at than everything else. But thinking tonight was different because tonight the information he was thinking about was the kind of information that could change the fundamental shape of the war, the kind that arrived once or twice in a generation, and that required not just thinking, but the specific kind of thinking that distinguished between what was true and what was strategically manageable. The truths, as he assembled them. Jon Snow was almost certainly Rhaegar's son. The dragon had settled this more definitively than any birth document could. Dragons didn't bond with northern bastards. If Jon was Targaryen, the legitimacy question became real. If his parents had been married, and Tyrion had read enough of the rebellion's histories to know that marriage had been whispered about in Dornish chronicles for 30 years, then Jon outranked Daenerys in the succession. This was manageable, Tyrion thought. Barely, but manageable. What was less manageable was the second truth. Daenerys already knew all of this. She had been alone with Jon for 3 hours. She was not stupid. She had done the same arithmetic Tyrion had done in roughly the same time, with the additional advantage of being present when the arithmetic was first performed by a dragon's amber eye. She was going to be afraid. Not of Jon, of what Jon represented. She had been building toward this her whole life, and now there was a complication she had not planned for. And Daenerys did not handle complications the same way in every instance. Sometimes she handled them brilliantly. Sometimes she burned them. Tyrion needed to manage this before the burning stage arrived. He went to Varys in the morning. Varys was, as Varys always was, already aware of most of the problem. A fourth dragon, Varys said. He did not look particularly surprised. Varys had the quality of a man who had decided not to be surprised by things, because surprise was inefficient. A fourth dragon, Tyrion confirmed, bonded to Jon Snow, who is almost certainly Aegon Targaryen, Varys said. Yes, my little birds have been suggesting this for some time. The marriage evidence from Dawn has been available to anyone who looked carefully for 30 years. I looked carefully approximately 20 years ago. He held Tyrion's gaze. I chose to wait for the right moment to act on the looking. Tyrion looked at him. And is this the right moment? Tyrion said. Varys folded his hands. It's a moment, he said. Whether it's right depends entirely on what we do with it. He looked at the window, the sea, the morning. The Queen is going to want to establish control over the situation. Her first instinct will be to contain Jon Snow, not violently. She is not heiress, but firmly. She will want to keep him here, on the island, As an ally she can see, rather than a rival she cannot. And Jon Snow. Jon Snow genuinely does not want the throne. Varys looked at Tyrion. I have spent my life being paid to determine the difference between men who say they don't want power and men who mean it. He means it, which makes him either the most useful or the most dangerous person we've encountered this year, depending on whether we can keep the realm from choosing him anyway. The realm will choose him, Tyrion said. Yes. Varys was quiet for a moment. The realm is very fond of kings who don't want to be king. They find it reassuring. It suggests competence without ambition, which is the specific combination they most need and least expect. He held Tyrion's gaze. When word spreads, and it will spread within the week, servants being servants, that a Targaryen man arrived at Dragonstone and had a dragon choose him in the Queen's own caves, the lords who have been hesitating about Daenerys will not hesitate about him. Because he's a man, Tyrion said. Partly. Varys was still. Because he's northern-born and northern-raised, and they'll call him Westerosi in the way they'll never call her that. Because he's a dragon rider and not a foreign conqueror. Because he doesn't want it. He paused. The combination is very appealing to men who've been waiting for an excuse to support a cause they don't have yet. Tyrion looked at the window. What do we do? He said. We ensure, Varys said, that the choice the realm makes, when it makes it, is a choice that serves the realm rather than dividing it. Which means we need Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen to arrive at an arrangement before the realm forces one on them. He looked at Tyrion. That is your job. I will manage the information. You will manage the people. Tyrion looked at him. I hate this job, Tyrion said. You're very good at it. That's what makes it terrible. He went to find Jon. Ira, what loyalty cost him? Jorah. Mormont came to find Jon on the second day. Not officially, he came to the courtyard where Jon was working with Vhagar, the two of them going through the exercises that Jon had been developing with the Bond, learning what the dragon could do and how it communicated, what it was capable of and what it needed. He came and he stood at the courtyard's edge, and he watched. Jon noticed him. Jorah Mormont was not a man who was easy to miss. He was large in the northern way, the Mormont way, Bear Island producing a specific kind of person, built for cold and hardship, and the specific loyalty that cold and hardship produced when they'd been in someone's family long enough. Jon had heard of him. Jorah's story was part of the Wall's history in a sideways fashion. The man who had fled Westeros ahead of Ned Stark's justice, and who had been in exile ever since. He was also the man who had been at Daenerys' side for longer than anyone. Jon went to him. Sir Jorah, he said. Jorah held the gaze with the look of a man who had been deciding something, and had arrived at the end of the deciding. Lord Snow, he said, then, with the correction arriving before Jon made it. Your Grace, I don't know what to call you yet. Jon works, Jon said. Jorah was quiet. I want to tell you something, he said, directly, because I think you prefer direct. I do. I have followed Daenerys Targaryen since she was a girl sold to a Khal for political gain, Jorah said. I have followed her through things that should have broken her, and through things she did that I didn't agree with, and through everything that made her what she is. He held on to it. My loyalty to her is the thing I have instead of my house, and instead of my honor in the ordinary sense, and instead of anything else I might have built if my life had gone differently. Jon held his gaze. I understand, Jon said. I'm not sure you do. Jorah was quiet. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand where I'm standing when I say what I'm about to say. He paused. You are good for her. The dragon. The truth of what you are. He paused again. The fact that you don't want the throne. She has been surrounded by people who want things from her for so long that the concept of someone who doesn't want the specific thing she has It affects her? I can see it. Jon said nothing. I'm not asking you to take care of her, Jorah said. She doesn't need taking care of. I'm telling you that I see what is happening between the two of you, and I am asking you not to be careless with it. He held on to it. She has been hurt by carelessness more than by cruelty. The people who hurt her deliberately, she could fight. The people who simply didn't account for what they were doing to her. Those are the ones that left marks. Jon held his gaze. I'm not planning to be careless, Jon said. No. Jorah was quiet. I don't think you are. I think you're the most careful man with other people's dignity that I've ever met who actually does anything. He paused. That's meant as a compliment. I took it as one. Jorah held the gaze a moment longer. One more thing, he said. When the time comes, when you go north and she goes south and the separation is real, tell her plainly. Don't let her find out through the absence. She spent her life finding things out through absence, and it's the specific shape of hurt she has the least defense against. He held on to it. Tell her you're going. Tell her what it means. She'll manage it. She manages everything. Jon held his gaze. I will, he said. Jorah held the gaze one final moment. Then he nodded. He went back toward the keep. Jon watched him go. He thought, the loyalty Jorah carries for her is the thing I want to carry for the North. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, everything. The truth confirmed. Sam's message. The message arrived from Bran on the 6th day. Jon received it alone. Davos brought it to him, in the private rooms he'd been given, which were comfortable in a way that communicated he was a guest of high standing, rather than comfortable in a way that communicated he was welcome to stay as long as he wanted. There was a difference. Jon had noticed it. He read the letter. He read it twice. Then he sat with it for a long time. The letter was from Bran, but the information was Sam's, Sam, who was at the Citadel, and who had found the record of the marriage in a Septon's private diary, the diary of the man who had married Rhaegar Targaryen to Lyanna Stark in a secret ceremony in Dorne before the Tower of Joy. The diary was specific. The names were specific. The date was specific. Rhaegar had set aside his first wife, annulled the marriage, legally, under Valyrian tradition, and married Lyanna in a ceremony before gods and Septon both. Jon was not a bastard. He was Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, legitimate and trueborn, the heir to the Iron Throne by the laws of succession that had governed the Targaryen dynasty for 300 years. He sat with this for an hour. Then he went to find Daenerys. He found her on the cliff top, where she went when she wanted to think without being watched. He had identified the spot in the first week, not by following her, but by noticing the absence of her from the places she was usually in, and identifying the one place with line of sight to the dragons that was also sheltered from the wind. She was watching Drogon in the sky. He came to stand beside her. She looked at him, then at the letter in his hand. The confirmation, she said. Yes. I assumed it would come. She watched Drogon. I assumed it existed and that someone would find it, and that when they did, it would say what it seems to say. She held the gaze. How does it feel? Strange, Jon said. Strange. She seemed to consider this. You've been Jon Snow your whole life. Yes. And now you're Aegon Targaryen. I don't know that name, Jon said. I know Snow. I know Stark. I know Castle Black and the Wall and Ghost and what it's like to die. He looked at her. I don't know what it means to be a Targaryen. I don't have 30 years of that the way you do. She looked at him. You have the dragon, she said. That's what 30 years of it feels like. Jon looked at the sea. We have to tell your council, he said. They already know. Varys knew before I told him. Tyrion guessed the night it happened. She watched Drogon. the great black dragon banking in the grey sky, the scale catching the light. The lords will know within a month. My lords. The lords who are deciding whether to support me. She paused. Some of them will decide you're a better option. Tell them I'm not interested, Jon said. That's not how this works, she said. I know because I've tried to tell people I was interested, and they disagreed with me for years regardless. You can't tell lords what to want. They'll want what they want. She looked at him. I need to know what you'll do when they come to you. I'll tell them I'm king in the north, Jon said. And if they say they want you for more than that. Jon looked at her. I'll tell them I have a war to fight, and that the war is north of the wall, and that any lord who wants to have political arguments while the dead are building their army is welcome to lead the next expedition beyond the wall himself. He looked at her. I mean it. She looked at him. I know you do, she said. That's the part I can't decide what to do with. She looked back at Drogon. If you were lying, if this was strategy, I'd know how to respond. You're not lying. You're a man who came for dragonglass and ended up with a dragon, and who is genuinely more concerned about the dead than about the throne. She looked at the sky. I have been around political men my entire life. I have never met one who was more concerned about the dead than the throne. Jon said nothing. We need to bring Vhagar out, she said. We can't hide it indefinitely. The servants know. The information is already moving. She looked at him. When it comes out, and it's going to come out this week, I want to control how it comes out. What does that mean? It means you present as my ally, not my rival, not the true heir, my ally, a Targaryen dragon lord who came to Dragonstone to join forces against the Night King. 2 Targaryens, 2 dragons. She looked at him. The message is, this is strength, not division. Jon looked at her. You want us to appear unified, he said. I want us to appear exactly what we are, she said. 2 people who need each other. The appearance of unity follows from that naturally. A moment. All right, he said. Tomorrow, she said. We bring the dragon out tomorrow. She looked back at Drogon in the sky. His name is Vhagar, Jon said. She was quiet for a moment. Vhagar's blood, she said. Her last descendant, Aemon thought. The old Maester at Castle Black. He knew the histories. Jon held the gaze on the sea. She was Visenya's dragon, the largest Targaryen dragon before Balerion. She outlived 4 kings. She died in the dance, Daenerys said. Above the God's Eye, Caraxes brought her down. Both dragons died in that lake, and both riders with them. She held her gaze on the sky. She killed Arax over the sea before that. Lucerys Velaryon was 13 years old. She paused. I know the histories too. I thought you should know the name, Jon said. She looked at the sky. Tomorrow, she said. Jon left her on the cliff. Vhagar, the Rising. Vhagar rose from the earth in the afternoon. Jon went to the cave entrance alone. Daenerys had offered to come, but Jon had asked to go first, the specific logic of a firstborn being as private as possible before becoming public. She had accepted this. He went to the cave entrance, and he held the torch, and he went down. Vhagar was awake. The amber eye found him before the torch found the dragon. The glow of it visible in the dark before the scale, before the mass, before the full reality of the creature that had been preserved in this chamber for 170 years. Vhagar had been moving since the day before. Jon had felt it through the bond. The slow circulation of something returning to its body after an impossible sleep. The stiffness of scaled muscle relearning how to be used. Jon put his hand on the scale again. The warmth answered. He said nothing. He did not need to say anything. The connection was not language, and did not require it. It was more primitive and more complete than language. The bond between a rider and a dragon that the histories described as something that rewired both of them, that changed what both parties were in ways that neither could fully anticipate. He thought, "Come up." Vhagar rose. Not quickly. The body had been still for 170 years, and the body knew it. The muscles working through a stiffness that was beyond anything Jon could imagine. The great neck extending, and the legs finding the floor of the chamber, and the tail uncurling, with the specific patience of something that had no deadline, and was in no hurry despite having been hurried at once. It took 2 hours to bring Vhagar from the chamber to the cave mouth. Jon walked beside the dragon the whole way, one hand on the scale, the connection constant, the communication between them not verbal but real. Jon saying here, "This passage, careful. The ceiling narrows not with words, but with direction, with intent, with the Targaryen blood that the dragon was using as a map." At the cave mouth, Vhagar stopped. Light. Full light. The afternoon light of Dragonstone in autumn, grey and real. Vhagar held at the threshold. Jon stepped out first. He turned back. Vhagar's eye was at the cave mouth. The amber gold in the daylight. The scale visible in the arch of the cave entrance, enormous, the dark of it in relief against the grey sky. "Come," Jon said. Vhagar came out. The reaction in the courtyard was the reaction that a dragon emerging from the earth produced, which was absolute silence, followed by a sound that was not speech. Followed by people moving in ways that were the physical expression of encountering something their category system didn't have a slot for. The Unsullied took a collective step back. The Dothraki, who had seen Daenerys' dragons from birth, and who had been trained out of the instinctive fear of them, stared at Vhagar with the specific look of people who understood that this was different. Not Daenerys' dragons, something else. Something older, something that had been sleeping in the ground for 170 years, and that wore that sleep in its color, in its movement, in the ancient quality of a body that had been preserved by Old Valyrian magic, and that was returning to the world with all the patience of something that had survived long past the civilization that made it. Daenerys was on the steps. She watched Vhagar emerge, and she watched Jon beside Vhagar, his hand on the scale. The ease between them that was the most visible evidence of the bond, the way Jon was not afraid and Vhagar was not cautious, and the space between them had none of the distance that existed between an animal and a person who was managing it, and all of the closeness that existed between two things that had recognized each other. Drogon was on the turret above. The black dragon looked down at Vhagar with the unreadable attention of one very large creature regarding another very large creature and doing the arithmetic. Vhagar looked up at Drogon. Neither moved. Then Vhagar looked away, toward the sea, toward the sky, toward the horizon, in a way that communicated with absolute clarity what Vhagar thought of Drogon's assessment, which was noted and not particularly relevant. Jon heard Davos make a sound. He looked over. Davos was standing at the courtyard's edge with the expression of a man who had served a king who came back from the dead, and who had thought that was the ceiling on the things he was going to have to process in his service, and who was now revising the ceiling upward. "Your Grace," Davos said. He didn't specify which grace. "It's fine," Jon said. That's a very large dragon, Your Grace, I know. And you, the two of you, yes." "Right." Davos looked at Vhagar. "Right." Jon put his hand back on the scale. He thought. Up. Vhagar spread its wings. The wingspan was massive, the full extension of it shadowing the courtyard and the lower steps and the people on both. The dark scale catching the grey light and throwing it back differently. The color of old things that had been buried. The muscles along the wings were unfamiliar with their own strength. Jon could feel it through the bond, the hesitation of a body relearning what it was capable of. He thought, slow. Vhagar went slow. The first jump was 15 feet, straight up, the legs pushing and the wings catching, and the dragon landed on the castle's outer wall with a sound that the wall felt in its stones. The second jump was higher. The third was flight. Jon stood in the courtyard and watched Vhagar circle the island for the first time in 170 years. Daenerys came to stand beside him. They watched together. Neither said anything for a long time. He's beautiful, Daenerys said finally. Not warmly, accurately. The aesthetic assessment of someone who knew dragons and was making an honest judgment. He's been sleeping for 170 years, Jon said. He needs to eat. We'll handle that. She held gaze on Vhagar in the sky. He's Rhaegal's size. Maybe a little larger. She paused. Given time, he'll grow. How long? Dragons don't stop growing, she said. Not while they're alive. Jon watched Vhagar bank over the sea. The thought came to him. If the Night King takes one of the dragons, there are still 3. And if all 4 face the army of the dead together, the math changes. The math that had been impossible becomes survivable, which did not mean it became easy. He thought, I need to bring Vhagar north. He thought, and every lord who sees me on a dragon is going to decide I'm supposed to be king. He needed to figure out how to prevent that. He didn't think he could. Above them, Vhagar found the thermals above the volcanic island and rose, until the dark wings were a point against the grey sky. And Jon felt the dragon through the bond, the specific joy of a creature that had been in the dark for 170 years and was, at last, in the air again. The first ride. What flying meant. The first ride was on the 3rd day. Vhagar had been flying without Jon, solo flights. The dragon relearning the air without the complication of a rider, developing the muscle memory of a body that had been still for 170 years. Jon had watched from the cliff each time, the bond running constant, feeling what Vhagar felt through the connection and building the understanding of what flight was from the receiving end. Theory was one thing. He had understood that intellectually. He had read the histories of dragon riders, and he had heard the accounts from Daenerys about what it was to be on Drogon, and he had understood them in the way you understood things you hadn't experienced. He had not understood them the way you understood things you had. He climbed Vhagar on the 3rd morning without ceremony. The dragon had a saddle, a dragonstone saddle, old leather and old metal, found in the castle storage rooms where it had been kept for 170 years by the chamberlains who had maintained the castle through multiple dynasties. Without knowing why, the saddlery for an extinct dragon was worth keeping. It had been sized for the previous rider. It did not fit Jon perfectly. It fit him well enough. Vhagar stood in the cliff field, and Jon climbed and settled and put his hands on the neck in front of the wing joint, the position that Daenerys had described and that he had been studying in his head for 3 days. He thought, up. Vhagar went up. The first moment of flight was not what Jon had expected, and was also exactly what he had expected, and the two things were not contradictory. He had expected the motion and the height and the wind, had built them from description and imagination, and they were present and accurate. What he had not been able to imagine was the bond under flight conditions, the way the connection between rider and dragon was different in the air than on the ground. On the ground, the bond was a presence, the awareness of another consciousness beside his, Vhagar's intelligence adjacent to his own, readable but separate. In the air, the bond collapsed the separation. What Vhagar felt, Jon felt simultaneously. The wind over the wing surface, the thermal rising from the volcanic island, the specific orientation of a creature that navigated by instinct rather than by calculation, and that knew where it was in the sky, the way Jon knew where his sword hand was in the dark. The ground fell away, and the sea appeared, and the sky opened in every direction, and Jon felt all of it through 2 nervous systems simultaneously. It was the most overwhelming thing that had ever happened to him. Not frightening. Overwhelming in the way that the most true things were overwhelming. The way dying had been overwhelming. The way coming back had been overwhelming. The way Ghost's bond was overwhelming if he let himself feel it fully, rather than managing it to a background presence. This was that, but scaled to a dragon, which was to say it was that but orders of magnitude beyond what a wolf bond produced. He thought, this is what they were. The Dragon Lords. He thought, not kings who happen to have dragons. People who happen to also be human. Vhagar banked over the sea. Jon held on and let the bond run and felt the island below, felt the cold of the water, felt the thermal off the volcanic rock, felt Daenerys watching from the cliff's edge, felt her watching, Vhagar's intelligence registering the figure on the cliff and identifying it as significant to Jon and therefore worth noting. He thought, go higher. Vhagar went higher. The island disappeared beneath cloud, and then the cloud was below them, and the sky above was the blue-grey that existed above cloud cover. The sky that Jon had never seen from below, and that was from above simply enormous. The ceiling gone, the world opened into something that did not have edges. He held on. He thought with the part of him that was Ned Stark's son. This is terrifying. He thought with the part of him that was something older. This is home. Vhagar understood both. They came down an hour later, and Jon dismounted on legs that needed a moment to remember what legs were for. And Vhagar bent his head, and Jon put his hand on the scale, and they held the bond in the aftermath of flight, the way you held a fire after coming in from the cold. Daenerys was at the field's edge. How was it? She said. Jon looked at her. I understand, he said. She held the gaze. Yes, she said. You do now. She went back to the keep. Jon stood in the field with Vhagar and the sound of the sea below and the bond between them, and thought about what it meant to understand something that had only ever been story before, and what it changed in you to understand it. Everything, he decided. Everything. And nothing that was the wrong thing. The Lords, how the word travelled. The word travelled faster than anyone planned for, which was to say it travelled at the speed of human nature, which was very fast. A Dragonstone servant mentioned it to a fisherman. The fisherman told his wife in King's Landing. The wife mentioned it to her neighbour, who was a washerwoman, who worked for a lesser lord's household. The lesser lord wrote to his cousin, who was a bannerman to a greater lord. The greater lord wrote to 3 other greater lords, and to the council of the faith. Within 10 days of Vhagar rising from the cave, everyone who mattered in the 7 kingdoms had received some version of the story. The story, as it travelled, was this. A Targaryen dragon lord had arrived at Dragonstone, and a dragon that had been sleeping in the island's heart for 170 years had woken for him, and he was either Rhaegar's bastard or Rhaegar's true son, depending on which version of the story you received. Jon received letters. He received them from lords he had never spoken to, and from lords he had met once at Winterfell during Robert's visit when Jon had been eating at the side table and the lords had not noticed him. He received them from houses he had to look up on Dragonstone's maps, and from houses whose sigils he recognized from years of training at Winterfell. He received them from northern lords who were writing to tell him they supported him, and from river lords who were writing to sound out where he stood, and from vale lords who were writing to say that Lady Arryn would be interested in a conversation. He read them all. He gave most of them to Tyrion without answering. These aren't for me, Jon said, handing Tyrion the day's stack. They're for the man they think I am. I'm not that man. You are, though, Tyrion said, leafing through the stack. Legally speaking, biologically, draconically, if that's a word. He looked at one letter. Lord Edmure Tully would like to formally request an audience. That's interesting. He's been a Daenerys supporter. Was, Jon said. Was. Yes. Tyrion held the letter. The was is the problem. Every lord who switches from her column to the interested in Jon Snow column is a lord I have to manage from Daenerys' side. He looked at Jon. Can I ask you something directly? You're going to ask me anyway. Yes. When this is over, when the Night King is dealt with, what do you actually intend to do? Go home, Jon said. King in the north. Take Vhagar north. Hold the wall. And if the lords press for more, then I'll tell them no. They'll press harder. Then I'll tell them no again. Jon held his gaze. Tyrion, I did not come south to be king. I came south because the dead are real and because I needed allies. I'm going home after. Tyrion set the letters down. You might not be able to, he said. I want you to understand that. It's not that I don't believe you, I do, which is the problem. You mean it. But meaning it doesn't protect you from the world deciding it wants you anyway. He held on to it. Daenerys crossed a sea with 3 dragons, and an army, and a legitimate claim 3 generations in the making, and the lords are hedging. You arrived in a boat with 6 men, and the island's hidden dragon chose you, and the lords are writing letters. He held the gaze. That's not fair. It's true. Jon said nothing. She knows, Tyrion said. She's not an idiot. She watches every letter that comes in. She knows who they're from and what they say before you do, most of the time. He held on to it. She is managing her response with remarkable composure, and I don't know how long that composure holds. It'll hold, Jon said. She's not her father. No, she's not. Tyrion looked at him. She's also not guaranteed to remain not her father under sufficient pressure. No one is. She has been under enormous pressure since she arrived in Westeros, and the pressure keeps increasing. And now there is another Targaryen with another dragon eating into the support she needs. Jon looked at the remaining letters. What do you suggest? He said. I suggest, Tyrion said, that you and the Queen present a unified front, loudly, publicly, that you make it clear, repeatedly, visibly, in front of witnesses, that you came here as an ally, and that you are leaving as an ally, and that the throne is not what you're here for. He held on to it. And then I suggest that you go north as quickly as possible. Take the Dragonglass. Take Vhagar. Get back to the war that actually matters. The more time you spend on this island, the more time the lords have to write letters, and the more time the letters have to change the situation into something neither of you can manage. Jon held his gaze. I want to bring her north, Jon said. I've been trying to convince her to come north. She needs to see the dead for herself, the way Robert needed to see it. And she hasn't committed. I know. Tyrion poured wine. Let me work on that. He left with the letters. Jon looked at the window, at the sea, at the sky above the sea, where Vhagar was a dark shape banking in the grey morning. He thought, every day I stay here is a day someone somewhere decides I should be king. He thought, I need to go north. Sansa, what she wrote. Sansa's letter arrived on the 12th day. It was longer than most of what Jon received, and the length was itself information. Sansa did not write long letters when short ones would do. He read it in his room with Ghost at his feet. The letter said, Jon, the Northern Lords are arguing. Lords, Glover, Serwyn and Dustin want to write to you about the succession. I have told them the succession is not on the table, and they have listened with the polite tolerance of men who have decided they know better than I do. Littlefinger has been attentive, in the way he is attentive when he thinks an opportunity is forming. I am watching him. You should know he is watching you. The other thing. Several lords have said privately to me what they would not write to you directly, that a Targaryen king would suit them better than a Targaryen queen. Not because of anything specific Jon Snow has done, because of what he is. Northern, male, Westerosi born. This is not politics I endorse. It is politics that exists. Come home. However this goes, come home. The North needs you more than the South does. Your sister. Jon held the letter. He read the Littlefinger line twice. He wrote back, Sansa, watch Littlefinger. Keep him away from information about the succession arguments. His interest in any political opening is not for us. Tell the lords the succession isn't on the table. Tell them I mean it. Tell them if they want to argue about who sits the Iron Throne, they're welcome to go south and argue it in person. I'll come home after the fight. He sealed the letter and thought about Littlefinger, the way Littlefinger moved through political openings, the way water moved through rock, not by force, but by finding the crack. A Jon Snow on a dragon was a crack in a dozen existing structures. Littlefinger would be finding the crack and making it wider. He went to find Davos. Send for Brienne of Tarth, he said. Tell her Sansa needs her in Winterfell. She goes home before we leave. She's not going to like leaving you. Tell her Sansa is more important. He held Davos's gaze. She knows that's true. She'll go. He was right. Brienne went. King's Landing. What Cersei did. Cersei received the news about the fourth dragon on the morning of the seventh day. Qyburn brought it to her in the throne room, not because it required the throne room, but because Cersei had been spending her mornings in the throne room since the dragons had first appeared over Dragonfield, in the specific way that people occupied their strongest position when the world was doing things they hadn't planned for. She read the report. She read it twice. She set it down. "Tell me what you know about the dragon," she said. "It was sleeping in the island's foundations," Qyburn said. "Our source isn't close enough to provide precise detail, but the accounts describe a dragon significantly larger than the Queen's three, larger than the two smaller ones, comparable or superior to the black one. Old, not recently hatched." He paused. "Preserved, somehow. The wildfire scholars I've consulted say Old Valyrian magic in volcanic stone could theoretically sustain a living creature in a state of reduced function for—" "I don't need the scholarship," Cersei said. "I need the implication." Qyburn folded his hands. "The implication is that Daenerys Targaryen is no longer the only Targaryen Dragonlord," he said. "The Northerner who arrived at Dragonstone, who we had been treating as an inconvenient but manageable vassal of the Targaryen Queen, appears to be Targaryen himself. The dragon's choice of him is the evidence. Dragons do not bond with people who aren't of the blood." Cersei held the throne. "Rhaegar's son," she said. "That appears to be the working theory among every intelligence source I have," Qyburn said. "The marriage evidence from Dawn that has been circulating in certain Maester circles for 30 years suggests he is not merely a bastard, but legitimately born." Cersei looked at the map. "4 dragons," she said. "Currently 3. He paused. "1 was lost north of the wall. Night King's doing, apparently. 3 remain." Cersei processed this. She processed it with Cersei's quality of a woman who operated at a level of political intelligence that her court consistently underestimated because they were too busy fearing her to watch her think. 3 dragons, 2 Targaryens, the Night King dead if the ravens were accurate, and the lords of the 7 kingdoms writing letters about a man they were calling Aegon. "They're going to come south," she said. "Daenerys has always been coming south. Now she has a—" She stopped. "An alliance. Whether she wanted it or not, the man with the dragon has given her legitimacy she didn't have before." "Among northern lords, certainly," Qyburn said. "The Reach and the Vale have been corresponding with Dragonstone. Everyone has been corresponding with Dragonstone." She held the throne. "What's our position if they come south together?" "Difficult," Qyburn said. 3 dragons against the Scorpions. The Scorpions are improved, Your Grace, significantly, but 3 dragons and the Unsullied and the Dothraki combined with what the North can field. "I know what the math says," Cersei said. "I'm asking what our options are." Qyburn was quiet for a moment. "Your Grace," he said carefully. "The man they're calling Aegon, the accounts suggest he doesn't want the throne, that he came south specifically for the Northern War and intends to return north. If that is true, Cersei said, then Daenerys comes south with 2 dragons and the backing of the king in the north and the moral authority of having just saved the world from the dead." She looked at the map. "Which is not a position I can fight. Not militarily." She was quiet. "Begin negotiations," she said. Qyburn blinked. "With Dragonstone." "With Dragonstone." She looked at the map. "Not surrender. Negotiation. There's a difference." She held the throne. "I want terms I can survive. Terms that keep my children alive, and my name intact, and some portion of what I've built standing." She looked at him. "I have been gambling on my enemies dividing. They haven't divided. I need a different strategy. Qyburn held his gaze. A wise decision, Your Grace, he said. I know, she said. I don't need you to tell me it's wise. I need you to arrange the meeting before Daenerys decides a meeting isn't necessary. She held the throne. Do it today. He left. Cersei held the throne. She thought about dragons. She thought about what her family had done to the dragons, and what the dragons had done to her family, and the specific shape of a dynasty that had ruled for 300 years, and that had been destroyed, ultimately, by the things it had created, by the fire, by the blood, by the creature sleeping in a cave that had woken up for a bastard northern king. She thought, Father would have had a plan. She thought, Father is gone. I need my own plan. She thought, surviving is a plan. She sat in the throne room, and she began to build it. Jon and Daenerys. What they built. The 2 weeks at Dragonstone were not easy, but they were productive. Not in the political sense. The politics were a constant managed disaster, the letters coming in and Tyrion managing them, and Varys threading information through channels, and neither Jon nor Daenerys being fully in control of the story the world was building about them. In the personal sense. In the sense of two people who had been handed a situation they hadn't asked for, and who were slowly, grudgingly, with considerable friction, working out how to be in the same space. They trained the dragons together. This was Jon's suggestion, and Daenerys's grudging agreement, and it was the right decision, because the dragons needed to know each other, and because Vhagar and Drogon needed to establish the specific hierarchy that large predators established when they were in proximity, and the establishing required both riders present to manage it. Drogon was dominant. He had been dominant for years, the largest of the three, the one Daenerys had bonded with most completely, and Vhagar was new to the air and still recovering the muscle memory of flight, and Drogon communicated his dominance with the ease of a creature that had been the largest thing in any room for a long time, and that was used to that fact going uncontested. Vhagar did not contest it. This surprised Jon. He had expected the ancient dragon's lineage, Vhagar's descendant, the blood of the largest Targaryen dragon in history, to produce a different response to Drogon's dominance. What it produced instead was something more interesting. Vhagar simply did not acknowledge it. Not defiance. Not submission. The specific response of something that was old enough to understand that the hierarchy question was not urgent. Daenerys noticed. He doesn't defer to Drogon, she said. He doesn't fight him either, Jon said. He acts like Drogon isn't worth the argument, she said. Maybe he isn't, from Vhagar's perspective. Jon held the gaze on the two dragons. Drogon is 6 years old. Vhagar is. Vhagar died at 250 years. Her descendant has been sleeping since 130 Ak. Whatever Vhagar's age is, it's not measured on the same scale. Daenerys watched the dragons. He's larger every day, she said. Vhagar, he's growing faster than Drogon did. He was already grown when he went to sleep. He's not growing from scratch. He's coming back. Jon held the gaze on the dragons. Give it a month. He'll be bigger than Rhaegal. She was quiet for a moment. That worries you, she said. Jon looked at her. Why would it worry me? Because the larger the dragon, the harder to ignore the rider. Because every lord who sees Vhagar in 3 months is going to write twice as many letters as the lords who saw him last week. She watched the dragons. The political pressure is going to increase as he grows. Then we go north before he grows more, Jon said. She watched the dragons. Come north with me, he said. You've been saying you need to see the dead. Come north and see them. Bring Drogon. Bring all 3. He looked at her. 2 Targaryens. 4 dragons. If the Night King's army has a weakness, fire is it. We test the fire against the dead before the dead reach the wall. She looked at him. If I go north, she said, I'm leaving the south without a dragon over it. Cersei will see that as an opportunity. Cersei will need to wait. Jon said, the Night King doesn't wait. The dead don't wait. Cersei can be fought in the spring. What's building beyond the wall cannot. She held the gaze. She had been asking him, in various ways, to convince her. He had understood this for days. The questions she asked were the questions of someone building a case rather than interrogating one. She wanted to go. She needed the argument to go. "Give me a week," she said. "I have logistics to arrange. The Unsullied need to be deployed before I leave. There are garrison questions for Dragonstone." She held the gaze. "A week." "A week," Jon said. She turned back toward the keep. "Jon," she said. He turned. She looked at him. "I believed you," she said. "About the dead. From the second day. I want you to know that." He looked at her. "I know," he said. She went inside. Jon stood in the dragon field and watched Vhagar and Drogon on the cliff's edge, the dark ancient shape beside the brilliant black one, the old dragon and the young one, sitting in proximity with the specific equilibrium of things that had decided not to decide the question. He thought, she's coming north. He thought, when she sees it, she'll understand. He thought, I hope understanding is enough. Beyond the wall, what 4 dragons meant. They rode north together. Not the full force. Daenerys brought 1/3 of her Unsullied by sea and overland, enough to defend a staging point south of the wall, while the primary operation went north of it. Jon rode ahead on Vhagar. Daenerys followed on Drogon, with Rhaegal and Viserion flanking. 4 dragons over the north. The small folk came out to watch. Not the way they came out to watch lords pass on horseback, the way people came out when the sky changed. They came out of houses and fields, and the doors of inns in every village, and hold fast between Dragonstone and the wall, tilting their faces up, holding still, doing the thing people did when they were encountering something their generation had not been built to contain. Jon felt Vhagar's pleasure at the cold. The further north they flew, the more the dragon's flight changed, not faster or higher. Something in the quality of it, the ease that a body found when it returned to the temperature it was designed for. Vhagar had been sleeping under a volcano, but the ancestors of Vhagar's line had flown over Westeros at the height of the Targaryen dynasty, and the cold of the north was a thing the blood remembered. They landed at Eastwatch. Commander Tormund Giantsbane was at the gate. He had been warned by Raven, but Jon suspected that the Raven's description had not fully prepared Tormund for the experience of 4 dragons landing in the field outside Eastwatch's walls, which was the kind of thing that even Tormund Giantsbane needed a moment to absorb. He absorbed it. "Crows," Tormund said, looking at the dragons and then at Jon, and then at Daenerys, and then at the dragons again. "You brought more dragons." "One of them's mine," Jon said. "Which one?" "Vhagar. The dark one." Tormund looked at Vhagar. "The dark one is very large," Tormund said. "He was larger before he went to sleep," Jon said. Tormund opened his mouth and closed it. "Inside," he said. "Drink first. Then you tell me what happened." Jon introduced Daenerys to Tormund over cups that were technically ale, but that Jon suspected had not started as ale, and had become ale through a process that Tormund would explain at length if asked. Daenerys drank it with the expression of a woman who had drunk worse and survived, which she had. Tormund described the situation north of the wall. "They're moving," he said. "The dead. The cold. Faster than last month. The scouts we send north, the ones who come back, say the army is moving in a line south. Not fast, but steady." He held Jon's gaze. "The wall's going to be tested this winter. Not maybe. Is going to." "How long?" Jon said. "Month, maybe 2. Tormund looked at the window. "Your dragon glass is going out to the garrisons, your obsidian arrows and blades. The Watch's rangers have them, the free folk fighters have them, but Jon, the numbers." He held on to it. "We've been doing our counts from the scouts. The army of the dead has numbers that the dragon glass doesn't solve. The math doesn't work without..." He looked at the ceiling in the direction of where 4 dragons were currently standing outside the walls. "Without those," Jon looked at Daenerys. "We need to go north of the wall," Jon said. "Now, before the army reaches us. We need to see what we're dealing with, and we need the dead to see what we have." Daenerys looked at him. "A provocation," she said. "A demonstration," Jon said. "We go north. We find the army. We show them fire. We learn whether 4 dragons can break the advance or whether we need to wait for the wall and fight defensively. He looked at her. We need the information. And if we provoke an immediate attack, she said, then we'll have provoked it on our terms rather than theirs, Jon said. Tormund looked at both of them. I'm coming, he said. You'll need horses, Jon said. We're flying. I know, Tormund said. He finished his cup. I need a different drink first. The expedition north of the wall assembled the next morning. 30 men on horseback to serve as the ground element. Jon on Vhagar, Daenerys on Drogon, Rhaegal and Viserion flying formation, Tormund, Jorah Mormont, Davos, and a selection of men who had been specifically chosen for the ranging. They flew north from Eastwatch into the grey morning. The cold changed beyond the wall. Jon had felt it before. The wrong cold. The cold that was not weather. He had been feeling it in ranging reports for years, had sat in Castle Black and read the descriptions and built the understanding from second-hand accounts. On Vhagar, flying north, he felt it through the dragon. Vhagar felt it too. The specific registration of something ancient meeting something that was the enemy of ancient things. And the feeling was not fear, but alert, the way a wolf scented something it knew to be wrong. They found the army in the afternoon. The army. What the dead looked like from above. From above, the army of the dead looked like the land had decided to walk. Not the specific shapes of individual figures, from dragon height, those resolved into texture, the surface of the frozen ground acquiring a quality that was not geological, but the mass of it, the scale. Jon had read the ranging reports. He had built the numbers in his head. Numbers in the head were not numbers in the body, which was what he was feeling now. The body understanding, in a way the mind couldn't preempt, that what was below was the extinction of everything he knew if it wasn't stopped. Beside him, Vhagar banked, and Jon felt the dragon's specific response to the army below. Not fear. The old blood remembered this. The last long night was in the dragon's inheritance, the way the wrong cold was in the Night King's, but the full attention of something that had been built for exactly this encounter, and that was doing the calculation it had been waiting to do. On Drogon beside him, Daenerys said nothing. Her face, from what Jon could see at this distance, was doing what it had done in the cave. Not performing. The actual Daenerys. The woman who had built an army and crossed a sea and not yet fully believed the thing she'd been told about the dead, and who was now at dragon height above it and believing it. How many? Daenerys' voice carried on the wind. Hundreds of thousands, Jon said. She was quiet. Can fire kill them? She said. It kills whites, Jon said. It stops the dead from walking. The White Walkers, the ones that direct them, need dragon glass or Valyrian steel. He held the gaze ahead. There are 4 of us. If we attack the army now, we burn whites and the whites don't come back. We can do real damage. And the Night King. He'll be in there somewhere. If he comes out, Jon held the gaze on the army below. If he comes out and he's exposed and we can reach him, we end it, Daenerys said. Maybe, Jon said. Maybe we end it. She looked at the army below. Do it, she said. They dove. What fire did to the army of the dead wasn't what fire did to a living army. A living army scattered. It broke and ran, and the fire followed the people, and the people were mobile and spread the damage as they moved. The dead did not scatter. The dead burned where they stood. The whites catching and burning and falling, and the fire moved through the army, not like a wave, but like a slow erasure. One figure, and then the next, and the next. And the burning did not spread to its neighbors, the way fire spread among the living, because the dead did not have the warmth that sustained the spread. But the fire was not unlimited. Vhagar and Drogon and Rhaegal and Viserion banked and dove and breathed and rose and banked and dove again. and each pass cleared a corridor of the army, and the corridors did not heal. The burned dead stayed burned. But the army was so large that corridors were what you cut in forests when you wanted to cross them, and the forest was still the forest around the corridor. Jon counted the passes. 6 passes in, something changed. He felt it through Vhagar first. The bond, the dragon's specific alertness, going to a different register. Not the combat alert that had been there since the dive, but something else. Older. The recognition of a very large, very cold thing. Jon looked for the Night King. He found him in the army's center, on a dead horse, elevated on a ridge of frozen ground, watching the dragons with the patience of a general who had been fighting a war for longer than anyone breathing had been alive, and who had learned that patience was the only variable that mattered. The Night King raised his hand. Jon thought, down, and reached for Vhagar's bond, and was half a second too late. The Ice Lance caught Vhagar in the left wing. The fall. What the Night King did. The pain arrived through the bond like a wall. Not Jon's pain, Vhagar's, but the bond did not distinguish, the connection transmitting the wing strike as directly as if Jon had taken the lance himself, the cold shooting through the left side of his body, in the mirror of what the dragon felt. And Jon gripped the saddle harness and held on because falling was not something he could afford. Vhagar screamed. The sound of a dragon in pain was not a sound the world made ordinarily. It was not like any animal sound Jon had heard, not like a horse, not like a wolf. It was older and larger, and it cut through the cold air over the frozen north, and something in the army below went still. Even the dead, registering that the sound was significant. The wing was damaged but not gone. The membrane torn. The injury significant but not crippling. The wing still functional enough to keep them in the air at a reduced capacity. Jon felt Vhagar making the assessment through the bond, the great intelligence of the ancient dragon, evaluating the damage with the same precision it had brought to everything, and the assessment was functional, but coming down. Down, Jon said through gritted teeth. East, east of the army. Vhagar went east. Jon looked back. The Night King had raised his hand again. He was looking at Viserion. Jon shouted something. He would not remember what he shouted. The sound carried on the wind the wrong direction, and Daenerys was already pulling Drogon into a dive toward the army's far side, and Viserion was banking to avoid a white column and did not see the Night King's position until the second lance was already in the air. The lance struck Viserion in the throat. The sound that followed was the worst sound Jon had ever heard, and he had heard terrible things. The sound of the village at Hardhome, the sound of the wildlings dying at the wall, the sound of arrows in bodies and swords in armor. This was the sound of a dragon dying, and the sound of it was a physical thing, the air around it disrupted by something that was too large and too suddenly gone. Viserion fell. He fell in a spiral, the great white-gold body descending in the slow, terrible way of something that had lost the thing that kept it up, and he hit the ice of a frozen lake below, with a sound that the ice felt for a quarter mile in every direction. Jon watched it happen. He watched Daenerys watch it happen. She was on Drogon, 200 yards away, and she had turned at the sound. And she saw her dragon fall, and Jon was too far away to see her face, but he felt what crossed the air between them. The specific quality of a person watching something irreplaceable become gone, which was not dramatic in the way the songs made it, and was not anything except what it was, which was a person losing something. He thought, get her out. Vhagar came down on the frozen ground east of the army's edge. The landing was controlled barely, the wing managing the asymmetric load of the injury, the great body coming down with the specific care of something that was hurt and knew it and was managing the hurt rather than surrendering to it. They hit the ground and Vhagar's left wing folded immediately, the torn membrane refusing the extended position. Jon dismounted. He went to the wing. The ice lance had torn a section of the membrane the size of a ship's sail. Not the bones. The bones had taken the impact and held, Vhagar's blood running true. the structural integrity of an ancient line maintaining even under an ice lance at dragon altitude. But the membrane. Flight required membrane. Vhagar breathed on him. Not fire, breath. The warm recognition. The bond communicating. I'm here. I'm hurt. I'm staying. I know, Jon said. Come on. We have to move. He heard Drogon land behind him. He turned. Daenerys was already off the dragon, running, not toward him, toward the frozen lake where Viserion had fallen. He caught her arm. We can't, he said. She turned on him. Her face. He had thought he'd seen Daenerys in her most real moments, at the cliff, in the cave, at dinner. None of those. This was the most real he'd seen her. This was the face without any architecture left in it. The person when everything that protected her had gone. He's down there, she said. He's gone, Jon said. Dany, he's gone, and we have to. He's down there. The army is 200 yards behind us. We have to move. He held her arm. The army of the dead was moving, slowly. They were always slow when they weren't directed, but moving toward the sound of the fallen dragon. We go now. We come back when we have a plan. You come back when we have a way to come back and not lose someone else. She looked at him. He had called her Dany. He had not meant to. It had arrived without planning. She looked at him. Then she said very quietly, "All right." They went back to Eastwatch. Rhaegal had followed. Vhagar limped south on the ground for the first 2 miles before the wing regained enough structural integrity to carry limited weight, and the flight back was slow and lopsided, and Jon felt every wing beat as a separate, managed pain through the bond, and he felt Vhagar managing it with the patience of something that had been in the dark for 170 years, and that knew how to be patient with pain. They came down at Eastwatch at nightfall. Tormund was at the gate. He looked at the 3 dragons. He looked at the space where a 4th should be. He did not say anything. He led them inside. Daenerys. What the falling cost. Nobody came to her room that night. This was not accidental. Missandei had seen her face when she came in from the field, and had quietly and efficiently arranged for the corridor to be empty, and the door to be available, and the dinner to be left outside, rather than delivered. Missandei understood Daenerys in the way that people understood each other when they had spent years together in proximity and had paid attention. Daenerys sat alone. She had been sitting with loss her whole life. Mother, father, brother. The kind that came from dying before you knew them. Drogo, who had been a life she hadn't expected to want. Ser Barristan. People who had believed in her, and who the world had taken in various ways that she had managed by continuing to move. Viserion was different. She had walked into fire for him. She had carried him in her arms when he was the size of a cat, and breathed smoke that didn't burn her, and known, in the way you knew the truest things about yourself, that she was not going to be ordinary. Not because of the dragon, because of what it meant that the dragon existed, that she existed, that the world was the specific world it was rather than the ordinary one. He had been proof, her whole life, that she was the thing she believed she was. He was gone, and worse than gone, what the Night King had done, what Jon had described in those flat, careful words. She knew what that meant. She had raised 3 dragons from stone. She understood what the magic required, what a bond between a soul and a dragon meant. She understood exactly what was now happening to Viserion's body on that frozen lake, and the understanding was not clinical. She had cried once, not for long, long enough. Then she had put it away in the place she put things that needed to be put away, the place that was full of other things that had been put away, and she had gotten up from the floor and washed her face and decided what to do next. What to do next was fight. She had always known that grief and action were not incompatible. They had never been incompatible for her. She had wept for Drogo and raised an army. She had mourned Ser Barristan and continued west. She had lost Viserion, and she was going to go back north and end the thing that had taken him. And the ending was going to be complete and permanent, and it was going to be done before the end of this winter. Missandei came to her door in the morning. "The king is asking about Vhagar's wing," Missandei said. "Tell him I know." She held the gaze. "Tell him I'll be in the field." She went to the field. She stood beside Rhaegal, and she put her hand on his neck, and she held the bond, the smaller bond, the two of them, rather than the three she'd had 12 hours ago, and Rhaegal did not need words. He knew. "I know," she said. "I know." She stood with her dragon in the cold northern morning, and she let herself feel the specific shape of what was gone for exactly as long as she could afford to feel it. Then she went to find Jon. Eastwatch. What they said to each other. The night, after the Maester had done what he could for Vhagar's wing, which was apply a salve and note in his journal that he was treating a dragon, which he did with the specific composure of a man who had decided that his job was to treat injuries, and that the species of the injured was a secondary concern, Jon found Daenerys on the Eastwatch battlements. He did not approach immediately. He watched her for a moment. She was looking north, the direction she had not looked north before coming here, the direction the dead were in, the direction Viserion was in. He came to stand beside her. "Tell me what happened," she said. "The Night King targeted Vhagar first," Jon said, "because Vhagar is..." He paused. "I think the Night King understood what Vhagar was, what the blood means. Aemon told me, a maester at the wall, that the last long night ended when the ice and the fire met directly. The Night King wanted Vhagar down before that meeting could happen. But Vhagar didn't die," she said. "He's Vhagar's blood," Jon said. "He's survived things that should have killed him. The wing will heal." He held the gaze north. "Viserion, the Night King saw the opening when Vhagar was hit and Viserion was isolated." He held on to it. "I'm sorry. I should have anticipated the second target. You had your own dragon to manage," she said. "Yes, and Viserion was mine," she said. "My dragon, my responsibility to protect." She held the gaze on the north. "I've been telling myself I kept them safe for 6 years. I raised them. I walked into a fire for them." She held the gaze. "I didn't keep this one safe." Jon said nothing. She held the gaze north. "What does he do with it?" she said. "The Night King. Viserion." Jon had been thinking about this since they landed. He had been thinking about the ranging reports, the ones that described specific cold-turning things, the way the dead were turned, the specific magic that reanimated the fallen. He had been thinking about a dragon-sized body on a frozen lake, and what happened when the wrong cold reached a body that large. "The same thing he does with everything," Jon said. She understood. He watched her understand and held the silence because there was nothing useful to say about it, and saying something useless would be worse than saying nothing. "Then we don't let him reach the wall with it," she said. "No," Jon said. "If an ice dragon hits the wall won't hold." He held on to it. The magic in the wall's foundation. Aemon believed it held against the cold's magic. The ambient cold, the Night King's directed force. But a dragon that can breathe ice against the wall's own ice. He stopped. "We can't let him reach the wall." "How much time does Vhagar need? To fly again?" Jon thought about the bond, the current state of it, the wing's managed pain. 3 days. Maybe 4. The membrane is torn, but Vhagar heals faster than anything I've ever. He was preserved in old magic for 170 years. Whatever that does to the body, it does it to the healing too. She held the gaze north. 3 days, she said. Maybe 4. And after that? After that, Jon said, we go back. But differently. We don't go north again to find them. We let them come to the wall. We fight at the wall where we choose the ground. He held on to it. The Night King's advantage is the cold scale, the numbers, the army, the moving dead. Our advantage is fire and concentrated force. We don't fight the army, we fight the Night King. He looked at her. Kill the Night King, the army falls. That's what Sam's accounts say. That's what the evidence says. You and Vhagar, she said, and Drogon, and Rhaegal. He held on to it. 3 dragons against 1. The fire of Vhagar's blood and the fire of Dany's, Daenerys' line. 3 fires against 1 ice dragon and the Night King behind it. She looked at him. Don't apologize for Dany, she said. I didn't. He held on to it. Daenerys, he said. 3 dragons. Can we do it? She looked north. We'll find out, she said. The waiting. 4 days at Eastwatch. 4 days was a long time to wait for a dragon's wing to heal, and a short time to prepare for the long night. Jon spent the first day with Vhagar, in the field outside Eastwatch, where the dragon had settled with the patient economy of something that knew the difference between what it could control and what it couldn't. The wing was healing. Jon could feel it through the bond, the membrane rebuilding in the way that very old magic worked. Not quickly, but completely. The tissue coming back without scar the way ancient preserved things came back without the ordinary deterioration of injury. He sat beside the wing. He put his hand on the scale, and he held the bond, and he thought about Viserion falling, and Daenerys watching, and the specific gap between the 4 dragons they'd flown north, and the 3 they'd flown back, and the gap was not only numerical, it was the gap in Daenerys' face, the gap in what she'd been, and what the world had now made her. Tormund came to sit with him. Tormund was one of the people in the world who understood how to sit with someone in silence, without making the silence a thing that required commentary. He sat. He drank something from a flask. He handed the flask to Jon. Jon drank. They sat. After a while, Tormund said, "She's angry." "Daenerys," Jon said. "Yes, good kind of angry or bad kind of angry." Jon thought about this. "Both," he said. "The good kind that makes her want to go north and end it. The bad kind that might make her want to go south and burn King's Landing first." Tormund absorbed this. "Which is she doing?" he said. "She's in her rooms," Jon said. "Writing letters, I think. I haven't seen her since this morning." Tormund nodded. "Ygritte died angry," Tormund said. "Not randomly. Tormund never said things randomly. The North produced people who said what was relevant when it was relevant and nothing else. She died the only way she ever did anything, which was absolutely and without regret." He held the flask. The anger was why she died well. It was also why she died. Jon said nothing. "The Queen," Tormund said. "She's got enough anger to end the Night King. She's also got enough to do things nobody comes back from." He looked at Jon. "Don't let her do the second thing." "I know," Jon said. "You trust her." Jon considered this. "Yes," he said. "More than I expected to." Tormund handed him the flask again. "The dragon likes this place," Tormund said, meaning Vhagar. He was looking at the dragon's amber eye, which was open and regarding Tormund with the specific attention that Vhagar brought to people who sat with Jon, rather than performing around him. "He's calmer than Drogon." "He's older," Jon said. "He's been through something that would make anything calmer." "What's it like?" Tormund said. "The bond." Jon thought about how to describe it. "You know how you know where Ghost is," he said. "Without looking. You know he's nearby, and whether he's alert or resting, and whether something's wrong. A wolf is a wolf," Tormund said. "It's like that, but larger," Jon said. "And in both directions. He knows where I am, what I'm feeling, whether something's wrong with me." He held the gaze on Vhagar. "When the lance hit him, I felt it." Tormund was quiet. "That's both terrible and impressive," Tormund said. "That's the bond," Jon said. They sat until the sky started to go dark. Vhagar stretched the injured wing, slowly, testing, and the stretch was already better than the previous evening, the range of motion returning incrementally with the evidence of healing. Jon felt the wing through the bond. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow, Vhagar would be ready. Daenerys came to find him that evening. She came to the field rather than sending for him, which was itself information, she had sent for most things since Viserion fell. The management style of a person who was keeping herself in a room as a form of control. Coming to the field was choosing not to be in the room. She looked at Vhagar's wing. "How is it?" she said. "Tomorrow," Jon said. "He'll be ready tomorrow." She held the gaze on the wing. "I want to tell you something," she said. Jon waited. "I spent last night thinking about what I would do if the Night King can't be killed. If we go north and we fight, and Drogon and Vhagar and Rhaegal aren't enough." She looked at Vhagar. What I kept coming back to was, there is no world in which I accept that as the outcome. I don't surrender. I don't retreat. I've been through too much. She held the gaze. But I also kept coming back to something else. She looked at Jon. "You were right about the dead. You were right from the beginning. You came south to tell people something real, and they looked at you like you were mad, and you kept telling them anyway." She held the gaze. "I should have come north sooner. I kept waiting for proof that I already had." Jon looked at her. "You're here now," he said. "I'm here now." She held the gaze. "Tomorrow I need to be there." He looked at Vhagar. "We'll be there," he said. "All of us." The Long Night. How it came to the wall. Vhagar was in the air again on the morning of the 5th day. Not at full capacity, Jon felt the wings remaining stiffness through the bond. The membrane healed but not yet trusted. The flight slightly asymmetric in a way that a month of flight would resolve. But in the air, moving. He would have wanted a week. He had 4 days. He used them. The wall's garrison had been preparing since the expedition returned. The obsidian distributed. The fire preparations in place. The dragon glass at every position. The free folk fighters who had come over the wall 2 winters ago were at their stations. The ones who had been fighting the dead longer than the Watch's rangers, and who knew the ground north of the wall in the specific way of people who had been raised on it. Jon flew the wall. Not inspection, orientation. He flew Vhagar from Eastwatch to Castle Black, and from Castle Black west, and then back east, the 300-mile length of it, under them in the grey morning. And he looked at every section, and every castle, and every staging point, and he held the picture in his head, alongside the picture of the army's advance that the scouts had been sending in ravens for the past 4 days. The army would hit the wall in the east first. He flew east. He found Daenerys at Castle Black with Drogon and Rhaegal, waiting. "They're coming," Jon said. "I know." She held the gaze on the wall ahead of them. "The ravens have been arriving since dawn." "East section," Jon said. "Eastwatch through the Shadow Tower." He held the gaze on the wall. "The Night King will be at the center. He's never been at the vanguard. He directs from center back, the army between him and whatever he's attacking. So we have to get through the army," she said, "or around it." Jon was quiet. The army's eastern flank is thinner. He concentrates numbers at the face of the attack. The flanks are managed rather than massed. He held the gaze. "We split. Rhaegal takes the western wall. Drogon takes the central. Vhagar and I go for the flank." She held the gaze. "You're going for the Night King," she said. "He'll have the ice dragon with him," Jon said. "Viserion, what Viserion is now. He'll use it at the wall. He'll try to breach the ice." He held onto it. "I need to reach the Night King before the ice dragon is positioned." She held his gaze for a moment. "And if the ice dragon reaches you first?" "Vhagar is faster than Viserion was," Jon said. "He's been flying for 170 years. Whatever Viserion is now, he hasn't had that." She held the gaze. "If you die," she said. "I won't," Jon said. "I've already done that once." It didn't take. The corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile. The almost. "Don't rely on that," she said. "Come on," Jon said. "The dead don't wait." The wall was breached at sunset. Not by the ice dragon. The Night King came at the wall from multiple directions. The army's scale producing the spread that the wall's garrison had prepared for, and that was still overwhelming despite the preparation. because preparation accounted for numbers, and the numbers were beyond what numbers could account for. The eastern section held for 2 hours. Daenerys and Drogon made 6 passes in the first hour, the black dragon working the army's face at the wall's base, the fire clearing corridors that filled again, because the army was too large for corridors to matter. Rhaegal worked the western section, where the army was thinner and the fires were more effective. Jon and Vhagar went east. The eastern flank was what Jon had calculated it would be, managed rather than massed, the dead present, but not concentrated. Enough space between clusters for a dragon to move through without the aerial congestion of the wall's center. He flew low and fast, Vhagar's wing holding at the reduced asymmetry that the healing permitted. The bond between them running constant and full, Jon feeling the dragon feeling Jon. The two of them a single coordinated thing that was the closest either had ever been to functioning as what they were supposed to be. He found the Night King. He was where Jon had calculated him. Center back, elevated, the ice dragon at his left flank, directing. He looked at Vhagar in the sky with the same patience he had looked with from the lake's edge. No surprise, no fear. The acknowledgement of a thing that was finally arriving. Jon flew directly at him. The ice dragon rose. What Viserion had become was not what Viserion had been. The fire was gone. The gold and cream dragon that Daenerys had raised from a stone now breathed ice. Blue, white, and cold. The cold that was not weather. The form was the same. The intelligence that operated it was not. Jon felt Vhagar lock in through the bond. He thought, I know. Vhagar breathed first. The fire from Vhagar's throat was not Drogon's fire. Not the brilliant clean orange of a young dragon in his prime. It was older, darker at its base. The fire of something that had been burning for 170 years in a volcanic chamber, and that had kept it burning, because that was what it was, and the burning was everything the cold was not. The ice dragon veered. The ice dragon's ice and Vhagar's fire met in the air between them, and what they produced was the steam of annihilation, the specific violence of two fundamental opposites colliding. And for a moment, neither Jon nor the Night King could see anything. Jon felt Vhagar through the fog of it. Go left. Vhagar went left. The Night King came through the clearing steam on horseback, elevated, looking up. Jon came down, Longclaw in his hand. The Night King was not expecting the rider to come at him while the dragons fought. He had been managing Vhagar as the threat, and had been managing it correctly. The ice dragon positioned to intercept. And he had not calculated for the rider coming off the dragon at low altitude and coming down. Jon hit the Night King the way the Night King had never been hit, from a rider with Valyrian steel, while the Night King's attention was on a dragon. It was not elegant. It was not the battle of heroes that the songs would later turn it into. It was a man who had died and come back, and who was carrying an ancient sword, and who came down through freezing steam at a general who had spent 10,000 years fighting, and who was, for the first time in 10,000 years, surprised. The Valyrian steel connected. The Night King shattered. Not slowly, not the cinematic dissolution that the stories required. He shattered the way ice shattered, the way the White Walkers shattered when they died. Instantly and completely, the cold and the form and the intelligence that had been operating both of them dispersing in the specific silence of something very large, becoming nothing very quickly. The ice dragon fell. Not the way Viserion had fallen, the conscious fall, the death in flight, the way the Walker Dead fell when the directing intelligence was gone. The ice dragon ceased to be a directed thing and became a thing that fell, the form still there, but the animating force gone. And the crash, when it hit the frozen ground east of the wall, was the last sound of the long night. The army of the dead stopped. Jon looked down from where he was, hanging from Vhagar's saddle harness, the dragon hovering with the asymmetric wing at considerable cost. Both of them alive, and together, and in the air, which was the only thing that mattered. He looked at the field below. The dead were falling. Every white in the army, from the wall's face to the horizon, stopping in the same instant and then going down, not dying, not in the way the living died, simply ceasing to be animated, the figures dropping the way marionettes dropped when someone cut the strings. It took 90 seconds. And then there was just the frozen ground and the fallen, and the silence where the wrong cold had been. And the wrong cold was not there anymore. And the cold that replaced it was only cold. Jon put his face against Vhagar's neck. He felt the dragon breathe. He thought, it's over. Alive. Ghost. Home. What came after? The weight of winning. They came back to Castle Black to ravens, hundreds of them, from every lord and house, and holding in the 7 kingdoms that had been watching the sky for 3 days. Thousands of people who had felt the dead and felt the dead stop, who had seen fire in the north and heard the silence afterward. Jon let Tyrion read them first. Tyrion came to him an hour later with the expression of a man who had been expecting news and who had received news that was considerably more specific than expected. "They're calling you Aegon," Tyrion said. Jon looked at him. Not all of them, but enough. He held the stack of letters. The letter from Lord Glover. The letter from Lord Royce. 3 letters from houses in the Reach who have never met you. All of them use Aegon. He held on to it. The transformation has been happening for weeks. The dragon, the parentage, the Night King. The 3 things together have produced a specific conclusion in the minds of the lords of the 7 kingdoms, and the conclusion is Aegon Targaryen has come home. Jon looked at the letters. "What does Daenerys say?" he said. "I haven't told her yet." Tyrion looked at him. "I wanted to talk to you first, about what you intend to do with it." "Nothing," Jon said. "Jon, Tyrion, I'm going home. I'm king in the north. I have a dragon that needs to recover from a wing injury, and I have a family I haven't seen in too long, and I have a wall to see rebuilt." He held on to it. "The Lords calling me Aegon does not change what I am going to do." Tyrion looked at him. "They'll push," he said. "They've been pushing," Jon said. "I've been saying no for 3 weeks. I'll keep saying no. And when Daenerys has consolidated enough support to rule without you, when she no longer needs the alliance, some of those lords will try to force a choice." "Then I'll deal with it when it comes," Jon said. "Right now, I need to find Daenerys and talk to her before Varys's little birds carry everything to her without context." He found her on the wall's top. She was looking south. Not north, south. The direction she had been looking for months now. The direction of King's Landing and the Iron Throne, and the thing she'd been building towards since she was a child. "You're going to tell me about the letters," she said without turning. "Yes." Tyrion read them. I saw his face when he came back. She held the gaze south. "How many?" "Enough." "Saying Aegon?" "Yes." She held the gaze south. "I want to be angry," she said. "I have a right to be angry. I came here with 3 dragons and an army, and I fought the Night King, and I lost Viserion for this realm. And the lords are writing letters calling the man who killed the Night King by a name that supersedes me." She held the gaze. "I have a right to be angry?" "Yes," Jon said. "And I am." She turned from the south. "I am angry, and I also..." She stopped. "I also understand it. Which is the more infuriating thing." She looked at him. "They see a man, a Westerosi man on a dragon, who killed the thing that was going to kill them all. They see the ending of the long night, and they see you at the center of it, and they see a throne that looks like it's supposed to be yours, and they don't care about 30 years of preparation and a legitimate claim, because they've never cared about the things they were supposed to care about." She held the gaze. "My family has a history with this. The lords choosing the man over the woman. It destroyed my house once." Jon looked at her. "I don't want the throne," he said. "I know you don't." She held the gaze. "I believe you. I believed you at Dragonstone, and I believe you now, and knowing that you're telling the truth is not the same as the truth being enough." She looked at the south. "If I accept your renunciation, if you publicly give up the claim and name me queen, there will be lords who accept that, and there will be lords who do not, and the lords who do not will spend the rest of my reign arguing about it." "Some of them will," Jon agreed. "All of them will eventually." She looked south. "The only thing that resolves it is if the renunciation comes with something that makes it real. Not just words. A structure. She looked at Jon. The North. Jon was quiet. What about it? He said. If you give me the South, she said, and I give you the North. If the North's independence is formally recognized, the North's king formally recognized by the Queen of the Six Kingdoms, then the renunciation means something. It's not Jon Snow gave up the throne out of the goodness of his heart. It's Aegon Targaryen and Daenerys Targaryen negotiated a division of the realm that serves both their peoples. She held the gaze. It's a settlement, not a charity. Jon looked at her. The North, he said. Free, free, she said. What Robb Stark fought for. What the Northern Lords have wanted since the War of Five Kings. They'll push for more, Jon said. Other kingdoms. If the North is free, the other kingdoms didn't just fight the Night King, she said. The North did. You did. Vhagar did. She held the gaze. The North earned it. The precedent is specific to what the North did, not what every kingdom that wants independence wants. Jon sat with that for a long time. Say it plainly, he said. You renounce the claim to the Iron Throne publicly and formally, she said. You acknowledge me as Queen of the Six Kingdoms. The North is declared an independent kingdom with you as its king. We sign a treaty, alliance, trade, mutual defense. Two kingdoms, one treaty. She looked at him. You go home. I go south. The lords who are going to fight about Aegon Targaryen are given an Aegon Targaryen who chose the North and signed a treaty with the Queen. They can argue about it forever. The structure will hold. Jon looked at the south. He thought about Winterfell, about Sansa and Arya and Bran, about Ghost, who he'd left at Winterfell months ago and who he felt in the bond the way you felt things at distance, present but far, alive but not close. He thought about the Wall, which needed rebuilding now that the dead had hit it. He thought about Vhagar, whose wing was still healing, who needed the North the way Jon needed the North. He thought about what he had been, and what the world had tried to make him, and what he was going to be. The North free, he said. Free, she said. And you, he said. The South. You rule it. Tyrion and Varys and whoever else you trust to help you rule it. He looked at her. You don't burn things. She held the gaze. I burn things that need burning, she said. Daenerys, I know what you mean. She held the gaze. I know who I am and who I'm afraid I could become. I've known it since Viserion fell. She held the gaze. I'm not my father. I will not be my father. But I will not promise you that I am gentle. She held the gaze. The South needs someone who isn't gentle. It needs someone who will hold it. Jon looked at her. I know, he said. They held the gaze for a moment. You killed the Night King on my dragon's back, she said, hanging from the saddle harness. The corner of her mouth. I've been thinking about that image, how it looked from below. Probably ridiculous, Jon said. Probably terrifying, she said. It looked like exactly what it was. A man with a sword doing the thing that needed doing without caring how it looked. She held the gaze. You're the most effective person I've ever met at doing the thing that needed doing. You're better at the ruling part, Jon said. I know, she said. That's why this works. She held out her hand, not a handshake, the gesture of someone offering the formal completion of an agreement between equals. Jon held her gaze for a moment. He took it. Two Targaryens on the wall in the northern winter, the dead gone from the field below, the wrong cold absent from the air, the two dragons on the wall's battlement behind them, the black and the dark ancient, and the south ahead of one, and the north ahead of the other. Together, she said. Together, Jon said. The announcement. What the world heard. They made the announcement at Castle Black. Not a throne room, not a great hall, the courtyard of Castle Black, which was the appropriate setting for what was being said, which was, the Night King is dead and the war is over, and what follows is not a throne war, but a settlement. Jon spoke first. He said, I am Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. I hold the legitimate claim to the Iron Throne by law of succession, and by the bond between me and Vhagar, who carries the blood of Vhagar, and who chose me in the foundations of Dragonstone. He said, I renounce the claim The courtyard was very quiet. I renounce it because the North has been waiting for its freedom for longer than I have been alive. I renounce it because the Iron Throne was built for a different world than the one we're going to live in going forward. I renounce it because the Queen who will sit it is better suited to the sitting than I am. And she proved it by coming north and fighting the dead when she could have stayed south and waited. He held the courtyard's attention. I name Daenerys of House Targaryen Queen of the Six Kingdoms. I ask only one thing, the North's independence. He looked at Daenerys. She looked at him. The North is free, she said. Jon of House Stark, Jon of both houses, both names, is king in the North. The treaty is signed. The kingdoms are too. She held the courtyard's attention. The next person to argue about this will argue it with me. The quiet lasted one moment. Then Tormund made a sound that was somewhere between approval and relief, and the northern wildness that had never quite fit in anywhere civilized. The courtyard found its voice. The aftermath. What they each took from it. The renunciation produced different responses from different people. Davos took Jon aside immediately after the announcement in the corridor outside the castle black courtyard, with the specific Davos speed of a man who had been waiting for the right moment and had decided the moment was now. You just gave away the Iron Throne, Davos said. I know, Jon said. The legitimate claim. The strongest claim in the realm. You stood in front of everyone, and you gave it away. I know, Davos. To a foreign queen with 2 dragons. She helped kill the Night King, Jon said. She lost a dragon killing the Night King. Yes. Davos looked at him with the expression of a man processing something that he had known was coming, and that was still landing harder than anticipated. She's going to go south, Davos said. Daenerys. She's going south to deal with Cersei, and whatever's happening down there, and she's going to sit the Iron Throne. And you're going north. Yes. With a dragon. Yes. To rebuild the wall. Someone has to. Davos held the gaze. The Northern Lords, he said. Glover, Serwyn, the ones who are writing letters calling you Aegon. They're not going to be happy about the settlement. They're going to be very happy about the settlement, Jon said. The North is free. Robb Stark died for the North's freedom. My father, Ned Stark, served a king he didn't respect his whole life, because the North had bent the knee. The North is free. The Lords are going to be furious at me personally, and thrilled about what the fury produced. Davos absorbed this. That's a very political observation, Davos said. I've been south for a while, Jon said. Davos held the gaze. You're different, Davos said. Not critically, observationally. Not completely. Still you, but different. King's Landing does that, Jon said. Or dragons do. I'm not sure which. Probably both. Davos held the gaze. For what it's worth, and I don't usually say this, because I try not to, because stating the obvious is a waste of time. What you did up there, he gestured north, toward the wall, toward the field where the dead had fallen. What you did was the right thing. I know, Jon said. Stop saying I know to everything. It's not performance. I know because it's the only thing that made sense. He held Davos's gaze. The throne would have cost more than the North's freedom was worth. The North's freedom didn't cost anything except not wanting something I never wanted. Davos held the gaze. All right, he said. When do we leave? 3 days, Jon said. Vhagar needs the days. 3 days. He started to turned back. The treaty, the 6 kingdoms and the North, the mutual defense provision. Yes. So if someone attacks the North, Daenerys sends forces. Yes. And if she needs the North, we go south. He held on to it. If Daenerys burns a city that didn't need burning, the treaty has a provision about that too. Davos looked at him. You put in a provision, Davos said. Tyrion helped, Jon said. He had the same concern. Davos shook his head, the Davos expression of a man who had found something both impressive and mildly alarming. 3 days, he said, and went. Tormund found Jon last. He found him with Vhagar in the field, Jon going through the post-flight check that he had developed over weeks of riding, checking the wing, feeling through the bond for anything that needed attention. The routine that the bond had made automatic, but that Jon maintained deliberately, because deliberate maintenance was what had kept the wall standing and what would keep his dragon functional. Tormund stood at the field's edge. "King in the north," Tormund said. "Yes," Jon said. "Free north." "Yes." "And the southern queen takes the south." "Yes." Tormund looked at Vhagar. "The dragon stays north," he said. "Permanent." "Permanent," Jon said. "He guards the wall. Even without the dead, the wall needs maintaining, and Vhagar is the best argument for maintaining it that I can provide." Tormund was quiet. "Mance wanted this," Tormund said. "The old Mance. He wanted the wall to be a place the free folk could cross freely, and the south to leave the north alone." He held the gaze on the dragon. "This isn't that, but it's something that looks like a start." "It's a start," Jon said. "The free folk aren't going to love bending the knee to another king. They don't have to bend the knee. The North's independence is a political arrangement between the crown and the northern houses. The free folk are," Jon paused. "The free folk are something else. We'll work it out." Tormund held the gaze. "You sound very confident about that." "I'm not confident at all," Jon said. "I'm king in the north, and I have a dragon, and I have no idea how to make all of this work. But it's what I've got, and I'm going home, and I'll figure it out when I get there." Tormund grinned. The Tormund grin, the full, impossible warmth of the man, the thing that had made people follow him through impossible conditions because it communicated something that could not be faked, which was, things are terrible, and we're doing them anyway, and that's actually fine. "Good enough for me," Tormund said. Home. What he found waiting. Daenerys left the morning before Jon. She left for the south with Drogon and Rhaegal and the Unsullied, and the Dothraki and Tyrion and Varys and Missandei, and the full machinery of a conquering queen, who was now the queen of 6 kingdoms with a signed treaty and a dead Night King behind her. She came to find Jon before the departure. She found him in the field with Vhagar. She stood at the field's edge, and she waited until he turned and came to her, which he did. The bond between him and the dragon, communicating her presence before his eyes confirmed it. They stood at the field's edge. "When I get to King's Landing," she said, "there will be negotiations with Cersei, or whatever comes after Cersei. Qyburn's been sending ravens, and she's not as committed to dying on the throne as she was 6 months ago." She held the gaze. "It's going to be complicated." "Everything south of the neck is complicated," Jon said. "Yes." She held the gaze. "You're not going to want to come south again." "Probably not soon," he said. She held the gaze. "I need you to know," she said, "that the settlement, the arrangement, I didn't accept it because I had no choice. I had choices. I could have pressed. The lords would have fought about it, and some of them would have fought for me." She held the gaze. "I accepted it because it was right, because you earned the North's freedom with everything you did, and because ruling is harder when you've won the wrong way." She paused. "My father won the wrong way. It built his downfall." Jon looked at her. "You're not your father," he said. "I know." She held the gaze. "I want to keep knowing it. The settlement helps. It means I start with a foundation that was built right." She paused. "So, thank you for the North, for insisting on it. It was my condition," Jon said, "not charity." "I know." The corner of her mouth. "I like that better." A moment. "The treaty has the mutual defense provision," she said. "Yes, if the North needs something, we'll write," Jon said. She held the gaze. "Right," she said. "Don't just write when there's a crisis. Write Normally, she held the attention with the Daenerys directness that was the thing he had come to trust most. The quality that Jorah had told him was rare in her life, and that she deployed only when she decided something mattered enough for it. I don't have many people I can say things to without it becoming political. Jorah, Missandei, possibly Tyrion. When he's not managing something, she held the gaze. Possibly you. Jon was quiet. Possibly me, he said. She held the gaze one more moment. Then she turned and walked toward her dragon without looking back. The Daenerys walk. The Queen's walk. The walk of a woman who had decided what she was and moved like it. Jon watched her go. He thought, the South has no idea what it's getting. And it's getting exactly what it needs. Right normally. Yes, he turned back to Vhagar, the amber eye on him. Come on, Jon said. We're going home. Jon rode Vhagar home. He rode north from Castle Black on the dragon's back, the wing fully healed now in the weeks since the battle. The membrane rebuilt and tested and trusted, the flight no longer asymmetric. Vhagar above the north was a different dragon from Vhagar in the cave, and Vhagar on Dragonstone. The cold agreed with him. The air agreed with him. The ancient blood that remembered these landscapes, finding the landscapes and recognizing them. Jon looked down. The north from Dragon Height was enormous. He had always known this. The north was enormous in the way that things were enormous when you lived in them and experienced their size as distance and weather and the time it took to cross them. From above, the enormity was visible. The forests and the rivers and the grey winter fields and the holds and the castles that were the people's anchors in a landscape that without the anchors would swallow them. He saw Winterfell from 30 miles out. He felt Ghost before he saw him, the Bond, the wolf somewhere in the castle's grounds, alive and present and aware of something approaching that it knew. Jon felt the recognition through the Bond the way he felt Vhagar. The same channel, the same blood, the same ancestral magic that connected dragon lords to their dragons working on a wolf whose bond was not Targaryen blood, but something older. They came down outside Winterfell's walls. Ghost was at the gate. The direwolf sat at the gate looking at Vhagar with the specific Ghost assessment of something that was deciding what this new thing was and where it ranked. Vhagar looked down at Ghost with the amber eye. Ghost walked to Vhagar. Vhagar put its head down. Ghost walked around the head once, sniffed, returned to Jon's side. Jon put his hand on Ghost. He put his other hand on Vhagar's scale. The two bonds, simultaneous, the wolves and the dragons, the old and the ancient, both present and both connected through him. The specific intersection of everything that had been building since he was born in a tower in Dawn and carried north by a man who had decided to love what he carried. Sansa was at the gate. She had come out alone. Not the northern lords. Not the household. Sansa, who had seen Vhagar from the castle walls and had come down without waiting for an escort because waiting was something she had spent too much of her life doing, and she was done with it. She looked at Vhagar. She looked at Jon. She said, "You brought a dragon." "I found one," Jon said. "That's not the same thing." "No," Jon said, "but it's what happened." She held the gaze. "The North is free," she said. "The North is free." A moment, she embraced him. The Stark embrace, brief and complete and everything necessary. He held his sister. "Come inside," she said. "Arya has been terrorizing the kitchens. Is she well? She's Arya." Sansa held the gaze. She heard about the dragon before you even left Dragonstone. She's been asking when she can learn to fight one. She held the gaze. "I told her she'd have to ask you." "She can't fight the dragon," Jon said. "I know." Sansa paused. "You can tell her that yourself." "Is that new?" "No," she let him go. She looked at Vhagar. Does he need feeding?" "He hunts," Jon said. "Good." She held the gaze on the dragon with the specific Sansa look that was assessing something for its management requirements. "He can hunt the Long Lake for now. The Northern Lords are going to have opinions about where a dragon sleeps." "He sleeps at the wall," Jon said. "Eventually, when the wall's rebuilt, he'll be there." "He looks cold," she said. "He's happy," Jon said. "This is what happy looks like for a 170-year-old dragon." She looked at the amber eye. "He's watching me," she said. "He watches everyone." "What does that mean?" "It means he knows who you are." Jon held Sansa's gaze. "He's been alone for a long time. He wants to know the people around me." She held Vhagar's gaze for a moment. Then she went inside. Jon stood in Winterfell's yard. He looked at the castle he had grown up in and known and left and been made something different by and come back to. The specific homecoming of a person who understood that coming back was not the same as returning. That the place you came back to was always different from the place you left. Not because it had changed, but because you had. He thought about Dragonstone and the cave and the amber eye in the dark. He thought about the dinner and Daenerys' controlled face and the moment on the cliff when she told him she believed him from the second day. He thought about flying north and the army below and the Night King's patience. He thought about Viserion falling and the sound it made. He thought about hanging from a saddle harness in the clearing steam with Longclaw in his hand. He thought, it's over. Not over. The other kind of over. Done enough that what came next was something other than survival. He went inside. Vhagar was on the outer wall. The amber eyes watching the north, watching the specific darkness at the northern horizon that was not the wrong cold, but only the ordinary dark, the seasonal dark, the dark that was just winter. The wall would be rebuilt, the treaty would hold, or it wouldn't. The lords who were unhappy about the settlement would be unhappy about it until they weren't. Daenerys would rule the south the way Daenerys did everything. Absolutely, and with fire, and with the specific competence of a woman who had been preparing for this since before anyone had thought to prepare her for anything. And Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, the king who didn't want to be king, the bastard who was legitimate, the wall crow who came home on a dragon, would be king in the north. He would be exactly what he had been called when he wasn't supposed to be anything. He would be what his mother had tried to give him the chance to be, in a tower in Dawn with Ned Stark at the door and the promise being made. Free.